Okay, we're going to get going. Representative Geisen, since you're our guest, you want to lead us in the pledge today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good morning. I hope everybody had a great long weekend. We're going to open up the noticed public hearing on the non-germane amendment. And we're going to start with 2025-1651H, which is not what's listed in front of us. Representative Newsom, would you like to introduce the amendment? We're on just so everybody's same page, 1651.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm James Newsom, Representative Merrimack 9th from Hopkinton and Bow. This is Amendment 2025-1651H, which amends Senate Bill 43 in two paragraphs. The first one amends the bill that came to us from the other side, making it more similar to current statute, and still remains in line with the Supreme Court hearing or Supreme Court case that was the rationale for the original bill. And the second is the non-germane section, which seeks to expand the use of poll pads for town meetings, deliberative sessions, and business sessions. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Lane, go ahead.
Uh-oh.
No, I think we've gotten some comments about, and I don't know if we want to talk about, we got comments both from the Secretary of State's office and from some other folks about putting schools in here, that school district meetings had inadvertently been left out in the amendment. Would you
Therein lies the irony. As a former school moderator, I would love to have seen that in there. And I'm not sure what kind of changes we can make at this point, but it could probably be cleaned up so that the new language could probably get by without the section references. So it's something simpler, just saying to add town and school district, business and deliberative sessions, and special meetings. But I'm not sure the process for that at this point in time.
I guess we'll talk about that when we exec the bill.
We will have to.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you, Representative Newsom.
Thank you.
Newsom, you can rejoin us, you're fine, don't worry about it. Next up is Sarah Pershino. Also, I'm gonna amend your card because you didn't write the number on this one, so I'm gonna amend your card to, you didn't write the amendment number on here, so.
Hi, my name is Sarah Pershino. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for your time today. I am the town moderator in Hopkinton, and as Representative Newsom mentioned, this was an issue that came up in our community this year. I see the amendment as really a housekeeping measure to ensure that communities who've chosen to use poll pads for voter check-in are able to do that in all of their operations. We made the switch in Hopkinton in 2024. As I'm sure you're all familiar with, they have been a great time saver for voters who are checking in, who don't have to stand in alphabetized lines. And they've also really helped election officials to have secure, accurate data at the end of the night without so much time. As our team in our town grew comfortable with poll pads, we were excited this year to institute the check-in on poll pads at our annual meeting, especially after those significant gains and a very long line and delay to the meeting that we experienced at the school and town level last year. Unfortunately, guidance issued from the New Hampshire Secretary of State's office prohibited communities from using poll pads at their annual meetings, and that was quite a surprise to our election officials as well as to voters. So we had to do a lot of voter education this year to make sure people came early. The supervisors set up early to make sure people weren't waiting in line for a long time. As you can imagine, during an election day, people have in Hopkinton 12 hours to check in, but at the annual meeting, a lot like to come 10 to 15 minutes before it starts. So when everyone comes at the same time and has to try to get in alphabetized lines, it becomes quite a hindrance. So again, I really just see this as a housekeeping measure, and I recognize that there may be some language changes that need to happen. I'm not wed to the language in this amendment, just the overall concept that for 2026, our community and others that use poll pads would be able to do that at the annual meeting.
Will you be taking questions from the committee?
I'm happy to take questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Next up is Sarah Burke Cohen for the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Apologize for the writing on that. It was terrible. So. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Burke Cohen. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We are supportive of the use of poll pads at town elections. However, the reason I'm up here today, and that's why I put support/oppose, the language is a bit problematic. We would suggest simple language, as in, I think Representative Newsom said putting like town and school business and deliberative sessions. Currently, the amendment as written is actually referencing incorrect citations. It could have been a Scrivener's error for the reference to 38.1, should be 39.1, I believe. So we believe there's some problems with the citations that are in this current amendment that would make it problematic for towns. In that the references to definitions don't actually reference definitions. So the Municipal Association, like I said, we support the use of poll pads at town and town deliberative and special meetings and business, but we can't support the amendment as written because the citations are incorrect. Questions?
Okay, are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the non-germane amendment? Representative Gosofsky, can you grab the blue sheet for me? I don't think they do an online for remote testimony, but let me trust but verify. I'm not seeing an online section for it, so. Is it blank? Nope. And it's blank. Okay. With that, we will close the non-germane hearing for Amendment 1651. We will open the non-germane amendment hearing for, if I can find it, 2304, which should be, I'm imagining, pretty quick.
Are we open?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. James Newsom, Merrimack 9th, Hopkinton, and Bow. This is very similar to paragraph 2 from the previous amendment that we just heard. And for the record, this one is 2025-2304, seeking to authorize poll books to be used at town and school deliberative sessions and special meetings. As we heard in the first one, there are some bad section references, and we could simplify this language to make it easier and more usable. With that, any questions?
Are there any questions on the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get a pink card coming in. Next up is Sarah Burke Cohen.
I'm not going to go say the same thing I just said. So Sarah Burke Cohen from the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We support poll books. We don't support the language of this because the citations are incorrect. My testimony is the same as it was for the amendment on 2025-1651H. Any questions?
Are there any questions on the committee? Representative C.
Oh, thank you for taking my question. Is the on line 9, the RSA 38:1, where it should be 39, is that the only reference that's wrong?
We believe that, yes, that is one of them. We also believe that 39.4 relative to special meetings actually references the process of having a special meeting, not the definition.
Oh, okay.
And we would suggest that the special meeting is actually defined in 39.1 as well.
Okay. Thank you.
That's how we're interpreting 39.1. There is no specific definition for special meeting. The process of special meeting is defined in 39.4. It mentions that selectmen can call special meetings relative to, I'm sorry, things are just disappearing from my brain this morning. Can call special meetings.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Representative Guzikowski, you can grab the blue sheet. If it's blank, just give me a nod and I'll close the executive session up. Blank. All right, it's blank. Nothing online. We will close the executive session for the non-germane hearings. We will open the notice executive session for our pending work. We'll start off with Senate Bill 43. Representative Newsom, can you see on amendment, the first one, not 2304, but 1605, I believe it is? 1651. Can you file off with OLS and just have them amend your amendment? I actually think the 39.4 is appropriate. I just read that there is no statute, there is no definition of a special election in 39.1. So I think 39.4 is actually fine, but can you just have them change that 8 to a 9 and ship it back to us before we break for caucus for you guys?
What if we wanted to make other changes or
What other changes do you have?
to add school districts?
You know, I'm fine with it. I don't think it's a problem. So let's just tack that in while we're here.
Okay, and then have OLS and then have them come back?
Yeah,
Okay.
and if somebody objects to it, I imagine the disposition of the body is to pass the amendment. So unless somebody objects, let's just make the change, and if somebody objects, then we'll deal with it then. But I'm okay putting my head on the line for that one. Yeah, correct.
So,
Representative Lane.
thanks. One way we could do it is just say special meetings as defined in chapter 39. That way we don't have to worry about which section. And if it's section 1 or section 4, we don't have to worry about it.
I'm just reviewing real fast.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any pontifications while I'm looking over this? Yes, I did. I'd prefer to leave it at 39.1. I think just looking at it, I'm doing very quickly here, but there's other stuff in there. Warrant of justice. There's all sorts of other
Yeah,
stuff
there's
in
a
there.
lot of other stuff in there.
I personally would feel more comfortable if we just stuck with the meeting definition.
Okay, so we're talking about changing the citation to 39.1 and adding in provisions to allow school districts to do the same thing as a
Correct.
municipality.
And what we may need to do is do 39.1A, 39.1, 39.1A, and 31.1B, because that defines the 39.1A is towns adopting a fiscal year, which is a meeting. So we'll, in the rare opportunity they were doing that, we'd probably want that. And 39B are meetings held outside of town. So I would just toss those in there too while I was at it.
At that point, does it make sense to not have, or to not have section references and just say town and school meetings?
I'm personally fine with it. It's a little sloppy legislatively, but I'm fine. I mean, because it's not a school board meeting.
Yeah, we would still say deliberative and business sessions. So it would definitely, clearly not be the board meetings.
Let me just look at 652 real fast. (652) 27. Does anybody have any objections to that? Just making the language more vague in general?
Okay, let me ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So you're suggesting that we would remove the citations entirely and simply say something like applying to town deliberative and business sessions and special meetings, and school district the same?
Correct.
Okay, that sounds unambiguous to me, and the intent seems to be very clear, so.
Representative C?
Do we need to consider city elections?
They're already authorized in the opening line. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns on this? Okay, so I'm going to recess the executive session. We'll pick back up on Senate Bill 43. Senator Newsom, you're going to file that off right now. And Representative Lane, how long does your caucus need?
I don't think on this bill we need anything. We just haven't had a chance to.
Yeah. I'm just talking like a general caucus. How long do you need?
Given all the amendments we get.
I'm not, this isn't me trying to pigeonhole you. Just, how long do you need?
Just trying to figure out whether it makes sense to have the caucus after we've heard a few of the amendments and then.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm fine to do that if you want to work through it. Okay, all right, we'll do that. All right, we will come back into executive session and we will start from. All right, well, let's not start with 43.
44.
Let's start with Senate Bill 44 relative to hand counts of ballots in elections. And I will recognize Representative C for a motion.
I move we retain Senate Bill 44.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Representative Quayle seconds. We're now on the discussion of the motion to retain Senate Bill 44. Is there discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 44? Seeing none, when the clerk is ready, she will call the roll.
Vice Chairman Quayle?
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary?
Yes.
Representative Wood?
Yes.
Representative Harvey Valia? Okay, I wanted to make sure you're here.
Yes, thank you.
Representative C?
Yes.
Representative Gozowski?
Yes.
Representative Toner?
Yes.
Representative Giason?
Yes.
Representative Lane?
Yes.
Representative Ward?
Yes.
Representative Gilmore?
Yes.
Representative Bay is not here. Representative Brill?
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm?
Yes.
Representative Newsom?
Yes.
Representative Howard?
Yes.
Okay.
like
And
to vote.
Chair,
Yep.
Chair Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion to retain carries on a vote of 17-0. There's no report due, so I will send it off to Robin, our assistant, right now. With that, we will close the executive session on Senate Bill 44. And we will open the executive session for SB 45. Clarifying the placement of advertising signs on state-owned property, and I will recognize Representative Wood for a motion.
Yes, I'd like to move SB 45 to ITL.
Representative Wood moves any expedient to legislate on Senate Bill 45. Is there a second?
Second?
Representative Gosofsky seconds. So we're now on discussion of motion of any expedient to legislate on Senate Bill 45. Is there discussion on the motion? Representative Wood's recognized.
Yes, I after looking at the bill, we had a lot of discussions on signs, and the board was on a variety of places on this. I'm a minimalist approach to signs. Other people want more signs directly. I didn't see anything in this bill that was covered by the board through all the other discussions we had on similar bills. So I figured this would be a good place to ITL.
So further discussion on the motion of any expedient to legislate on Senate Bill 44. Hearing none. 45, excuse me. The clerk will call the roll.
Vice Chairman Quayle?
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary?
Yes.
Representative Wood?
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia?
Yes.
Representative C?
Yes.
Representative Kozowski,
Yes.
Representative Toner,
Yes.
Representative Giason,
Yes.
Representative Lane,
Yes.
Representative Ward,
Yes.
Representative Gilmore,
Yes.
Representative Grill,
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm,
Yes.
Representative Newsom,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
and Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. With that, the motion of the inexperienced legislature carries on a vote of 17-0. Representative Wood, you'll be responsible for the report. You cannot use the link for the reports. I haven't updated the link, so just send the reports to your respective caucus leaders if there is a split one.
Consent calendar.
And it's kind of a motion for the consent calendar. So moved. Is there any objection to the bill being placed on the consent calendar? Hearing none, the bill will be placed on the consent calendar. We will close the executive session for Senate Bill 45. Going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 103 FNL relative to the number of polling locations that are available for certain towns. Recognize Representative Quayle for a motion.
I move to retain this bill.
Representative Quayle moves to retain Senate Bill 103. Is there a second? Representative Wood seconds. Is there discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 103?
It's a problem that needs to be addressed, and we need more time to address it properly.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 103. Representative Lane, you recognized?
It's just a question, we ITL'd a similar bill earlier this year in this committee. So why are we now retaining this one?
I can't speak for Representative Quayle, but I'll be voting to retain because I want to work on the issue and just don't have time. I think the other one about this, if I recall, it enacts for the presidential elections, so it's not like we don't have time to work on it.
Okay, all right.
I'm just,
I
let
was
me
just
trust but
curious.
verify that statement, but I'm pretty sure.
I mean, it is complicated in that it does it only for the presidential ones and then goes back. And
Yeah.
I think that would be definitely a complicating factor.
It's certainly only for the presidential elections, which I think is something that we should discuss when we retain the bill and work on it. Because, as you know, I have issues with that too. Representative Quayle?
Chairman Barry wasn't speaking for me, but I agree with him.
Further discussions on the motion to retain Senate Bill 103? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the motion to retain Senate Bill 103.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolillo.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Kozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
Yes,
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Gilmore.
Yes.
Representative Grill. Representative Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Newsom.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion to retain carries on a vote of 17-0. I'm going to close the executive session for Senate Bill 103, and I've sent the report off to the clerk, to our assistant. Okay. Let's see if we have anything else. Moving on down. Okay, now the fun begins. Going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 213 relative to absentee voting. I will move off to pass. Is there a second? Representative Toner seconds. I'd like to move amendment number 2025-2461H to Senate Bill 213. Is there a second? Representative Toner seconds. I'll now speak to the amendment. The amendment is a replace all amendment, so it gets rid of the underlying bill and replaces it with the House position on House Bill 340 verbatim for expanding the definition of electioneering by public employees. I don't need to belabor the bill, I think, but that's what the amendment does. So that's my remarks. Is there any other discussion on the amendment for House Bill 340? Representative Lane.
thank you. So basically, you've put in HB 340 as it was passed by the House?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think given that fact, we can probably go ahead and vote on that one. Thank you.
I imagined, I had a feeling I knew which way this one's cracked down. It is for further discussion on Amendment 2025-2461H to Senate Bill 213. Hearing none, we're not going to do a voice vote on this one because I imagine we'll want the yeas and the nays. Yep. 2025-2461H. Yep. So the clerk will call the roll on adopting Amendment 2025-2461H to Senate Bill 213.
Vice Chairman Quayle?
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary?
Yes.
Representative Wood?
Yes.
Representative Harvey Balia?
Yes.
Representative C?
Yes.
Representative Gosowski?
Yes.
Representative Toner?
Yes.
Representative Giason?
Yes.
Representative Lane?
No.
Representative Ward?
No.
Representative Gilmore?
No.
Sorry. Representative Grill?
No.
Representative Wilhelm?
No.
Representative Newsom?
No.
Representative Howard?
Oh, no.
And Chairman Barry?
Chair votes yes. The amendment carries on a vote of 10-7. I'll now make the motion of ought to pass as amended to Senate Bill 213 with Amendment 2025-2461H. Is there a second? Representative Toner seconds. We're now in discussion of the motion of ought to pass as amended. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll when she is ready on the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 213 with Amendment 2025-2461H.
Vice Chairman Quayle?
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary?
Yes.
Representative Wood?
Yes.
Representative Harvey Balia?
Yes.
Representative C?
Yes.
Representative Gosowski?
Yes.
Representative Toner?
Yes.
Representative Giason?
Yes, emphatically.
Representative Lane?
No.
Representative Ward?
No.
Representative Gilmore?
No.
Representative Bay is not here, sorry. I gotta remember to cross her out. Representative Grill?
No.
Representative Wilhelm?
No.
Representative Newsom?
No.
Representative Howard?
No.
Chairman Barry?
Chair votes yes. The motion of ought to pass as amendment carries on a vote of 10-7. I will be responsible for the committee report, and I'm going to guess there's no consent calendar. So, I would have a joke. Going to close the executive session for Senate Bill 213, and now, now after that divisive moment, we get to do something together. Going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 215, requiring an unorganized town or unincorporated place to elect town officers for the purpose of conducting elections. I will move ought to pass. Representative Lane, can I have a second? Maybe?
Yes.
All right, Representative Lane seconds us, a moment of great bipartisanship. I will now move Amendment 2025-2326H. Is there a second? Representative Lane seconds. We're now on discussion of the amendment 2025-2326H to Senate Bill 215. So I'll discuss that. So we were going to try to pass this bill the day we heard the hearing, but enough people raised concerns about the process of how the election would be called and conducted for the purpose of organizing. The Secretary of State said they had a process. What we did was we asked for that process and we codified it into law. So instead of kind of broad rulemaking authority, we're taking the process that they currently do and codifying it. So we took the language, dumped it in directly to address those concerns, which I think, by the way, were very legitimate. I don't think we should be giving broad rulemaking authority to executive branch. So that's what the amendment does. I think you've all had it for a while because we did that pretty quickly. So is there any other discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, is there any objection to this being done by a voice vote for the amendment? All in favor of adopting Amendment 2025-2326H, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. I will now move ought to pass on Senate Bill ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 215 with Amendment 2025-2326H. I need a second. Representative Lane seconds me. We're on discussion of the motion of ought to pass as amended. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, when the clerk is ready, she will call the roll on the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 215 with Amendment 2025-2326H.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes.
We got seconds on
Representative
Okay, just making sure.
Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
Yes.
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Gilmore.
Yes.
Representative Grill.
Yes.
Representative, Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Newsom.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
And Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 215 carries a vote of 17-0. Without objection, this bill will be placed on the consent calendar, and I will be responsible for the committee report. Going to close the executive session on Senate Bill 215. Going to open the executive session on Senate Bill 218 relative to absentee ballot outer envelopes. I will recognize Representative Harvey Bolia for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I motion ought to pass on Senate Bill 218 and offer amendment 2025-2407H.
Representative Harvey Bolia makes the motion of ought to pass on Amendment 218. I second the motion. Representative Bolia moves Amendment 2025-2407H. I will second the amendment. We're now in discussion of Amendment 2025-2407H. Representative Harvey Bolia is recognized to speak to her amendment.
This is a replace all amendment relative to the absentee ballots. And I think you could see it's verbiage that we've seen before from House Bill 217.
Okay, so this is a copy and paste of House Bill 217. I'm asking that question, right? Just to clarify.
Yes.
Okay. Pull that up here. All right. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Lane, are you ready to vote on this? Okay. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll to adopt Amendment 2025-2407H to Senate Bill 218.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Gilmore.
No.
Representative Grill.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom.
Nope.
Representative Howard.
No.
And Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The amendment carries on a vote of 10-7. Representative Harvey Bolia is recognized for a motion.
I move ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 218.
Representative Bolia moves ought to pass an amendment on Senate Bill 218 with Amendment 2025-2407H. I will second the motion. We're now in discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll when she's ready for the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 218 with Amendment 2025-2407H. before we enter the voting mode, Representative Newsom, have you sent that amendment off?
I have, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Belia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gazowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Gilmore.
No.
Representative Grill.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom.
No.
Representative Howard.
No.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 218 carries a vote of 10-7. Representative Harvey Bully, you will be responsible for the majority report. Representative Lane, who will have my minority report? All right, we will put you down and close the executive session on Senate Bill 218. Just Representative Lane for now. Next up is going to be Senate Bill, we're going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 221. Relative to the verification of the checklist, Representative Burnham is recognized for a motion. Representative Burnham moves ought to pass on Senate Bill 221,
Move out to pass. Thank you.
and I will second her motion. Representative Burnham, do you have any amendments you wish to move?
Yes, I would like to move Amendment 2025-2463H.
Representative Burnham moves Amendment 2025-2463H to Senate Bill 221. I will second it. I will go ahead and, while our clerk is frantically catching up, I will speak to the amendment. The amendment readopts the House position, moving away from the Senate position to do an annual verification of the checklist. I will note the underlying bill was actually flawed. So if you don't amend it, we actually cannot pass the underlying bill because it didn't line up with what they were trying to do. The good news is the House has already passed a position on this, so we're just going to adopt the House position, and we'll see what the Senate does. I believe they've already re-referred or killed. I think, did they ITL our bill? They may have ITL'd it. I don't know. Okay. Well, they'll have another opportunity to vote on it. Maybe. So is there any other discussion on the amendment 2025-2463H to Senate Bill 221? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll when she's ready.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Emphatic yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Belia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gazowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Gilmore.
No.
Representative Grill.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom.
No.
Representative Howard.
No.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The vote carries on a vote of 10-7. Representative Burnham now moves ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 221 with amendment 2025-2463H. Right, Representative Burnham?
I sure do. Thank
All right,
you.
and I will I normally I wouldn't have asked for the verbal if I wasn't also seconding it because that would have been a little much. So we're now on the discussion of the motion of ought to pass as amendment on 2025-2463H. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 221 with amendment 2025-2463H when she's ready.
My apologies. There's just a lot of little details to fill in here. Okay. Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Belia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gazowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward, Representative Gilmore,
No.
Representative Grill,
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom,
No.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion of ought to pass as amended.
Excuse me.
Oh, Representative Howard, sorry.
Oh, you're good. No.
I had to go up back a line, sorry about that.
Let me guess. No. Okay.
I did leave that blank, so I did miss it completely.
So psychic.
No Representative Howard Well. I just know, yeah. Howard. That the motion of ought to pass as amended carries on a vote of 10-7. Representative Burnham, you'll be responsible for the majority report. Representative Lane, who will have my minority report? All right, Representative Lane will have the minority report. I think now is a good time. Oh, we're going to close the executive session on Senate Bill 221. Representative Lane, I'm going to break for a caucus because I have an amendment that I forgot to print. It's already done. I sent it to you, but I didn't print it. And we're going to let Representative Newsom try to grab his amendment. And I want to discuss with you the other one. So I'm sorry to do that to everybody. We almost got all the way through without having to break, and I apologize. Yeah. Let's come back at 11 a.m. And if we need more time, I'll just gavel us in and gavel us out. But I think that'll be enough time. But if not, we can take more. Okay, so I'll see you guys back at 11 a.m. That, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not. All right, we're back. We're going to open the executive session with my. Sorry, folks, my computer's got all my notes on it. It decided to go to sleep because we've been gone that long. I'm energy conscious, and I don't leave it running. Okay, here we go. All right, going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 222 relative to moving the state primary date. I'll make the motion of ought to pass. Is there a second? Representative Worry seconds me. Representative Wilhelm, you have an amendment.
I do. I'd like to move Amendment 2025-2406H.
You have a second? Representative Lane seconds. We're on discussion of Amendment 2025-2406H to Senate Bill 222. Representative Wilhelm, you recognize to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. This amendment simply moves the effective date to January 1st, 2027, which is in line with the House position.
Further discussion on the amendment. I'm going to be opposing the amendment. We've already passed it once. The Senate has it. And I don't see the need to pass it twice because I think we're getting a June date. The question is 2026 or 2028? And I'm not ready to take 2026 off the table yet. So I will say, and Representative Wilhelm did not mention this, we will have some things we will have to fix if we do end up going with 2026, because there's some things that we'll need to adjust. But we will have time to make those adjustments, I believe, if we end up going with 2026, which I do not know that we're going to do yet. So further discussion on the amendment. Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Howard. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a quick question about the amendment, and if it does fail today, if this could be brought back as a floor amendment, as you suggested. It's still something where we don't want to fully take everything off the table.
Yep, it's a question for the clerk, but my understanding of the rules is yes, it would be. I certainly wouldn't rule it non-germane. A little tongue-in-cheek to Representative Wilhelm there. Further comments, further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll on Amendment 2025-2406H to Senate Bill 222.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
No.
Clerk says no. Representative Wary.
No.
Representative Wood.
No.
Representative Harvey Balia.
No.
Representative C.
No.
Representative Gozowski.
No.
Representative Toner.
No.
Representative Guyson.
No.
Representative Lane.
Yes.
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Gilmore.
Yes.
Representative Bay.
Yes.
Representative Grill.
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Newsom.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes no. The amendment fails on a vote of 10 to 8. Welcome back, Representative Bay. I apologize for my brain. You were still missing. We're now back to the underlying motion of ought to pass. Is there discussion on the motion, on the underlying motion of ought to pass? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 222.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Balia. Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Guyson.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Gilmore.
No.
Representative Bay.
No.
Representative Grill.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom.
No.
Representative Howard.
No.
And Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion of ought to pass carries on a vote of 10 to 8. I'll be responsible for the majority report. Representative Lane, who's going to get the minority report? Now, so I believe your position can be ought to pass as amended in a minority report. I think you can do that. Check with the clerk. Just FYI. Anyways, we'll put down Representative Lane in the meantime. Going to close the executive session on Senate Bill 222. And we will open the executive session on Senate Bill 287. Oops, sorry, Representative. I will move ought to pass. Is there a second on Senate Bill 287? Representative Toner seconds me. I have an amendment. I will move Amendment 2025-2414H. Is there a second? Representative Toner seconds. I will discuss the amendment as this is actually one maybe worth listening because I'm sure if this does get enacted, people will do what they do. So we took out several provisions of the bill that we didn't like, and we added some in that we don't like. We do like. So the original bill only applied to absentee ballots that were going to a location other than where the voter is registered. And I don't like that. That's treating people differently. Outside of that's creating two different classes of voters. A very easy thing could be if you don't have a mailbox and it's going to your PO box in your town. Now you have to do this extra requirement that you wouldn't do if you had a mailbox. It just doesn't make sense. So it applies to everyone requesting an absentee voter. I tacked in that you can include the identification requirements with the application. So before you had to do a notarized, you could just do a notarized letter. I think there should be other forms of verification other than just a notary. I left the notary in place. And I also added in that if you're voting in person with an absentee ballot, so you're doing an in-person request and an in-person return, that you can physically show it to the clerk while you're there. So I tried to, and I also got rid of the signature verification because it was likely not going to stand up in court. So, and I also got rid of the part about having the outer envelope be marked as voter verified, because there's two reasons for that. The first is I do not like marking the outer envelope with anything other than what the voters put on it. And number two is we shouldn't be handing out ballots to voters that aren't verified. So if we should have control of the ballots when they go out, we shouldn't be trying to stop the bad ones from coming in. It's just if the ballot goes out, we should have control on them when they go out, not just when they come in. So those are the changes that we made. And I'm happy to take any questions on it because it's not a radical departure from the underlying bill, but it does. There's some parts in there I know you're going to like. There's some parts in there I know you're not going to like. So, any other, Representative Wary?
It mimics the process of the standard ballot more precisely, and so you're actually making an alignment there that's much more compatible with each other.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the process for getting a ballot should be as close to the same as possible, whether you're voting absentee or whether you're voting in person. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, the clerk will. Oh, I apologize, Representative Newsom. I didn't see you.
That's fine. How similar is this to some of the bills that we retained through the work of the subcommittee?
That's. I mean, we retained a bunch of them out of the work in the subcommittee, so that's a big question. Yes, it certainly deals with the subject matter, and I wasn't able to watch every subcommittee meeting. I'm not going to lie to you and say I did, but I did try to watch as many of them as I could, and I understand that we're not going to be in agreement on all of this, but I do think there are areas where we actually do agree to an extent, right? Like we don't want the outer envelopes looking differently. I imagine we would probably both agree on that. So. You know, I know you probably don't agree with the ID requirement, but I believe you should be able to submit the ID when you're doing it, and the original bill didn't allow for that. So while you don't agree with the requirement at all, I would imagine allowing it versus not allowing it is probably better. So I did try to take in some of those concerns. I don't think it's going to change your vote, though. Further, Representative Willem.
Chairman, any reason why we wouldn't want to retain it and work on it with the other bills?
Yeah, so I think this is where we're going to end up, and I would like to get this in place for the next election. The retained bill process, if you imagine a world where we adopt June as a primary next year, right? We're going to be engaging a lot quicker. So, these are kind of bigger changes. I would really like to avoid doing that while we're quote unquote in cycle, although we are technically in cycle now. But I would like to avoid. I'd like to do it now versus closer to the election because I imagine someone will find an attorney, and I imagine because it's whatever happens in election law, they always go to the courts. So I'd like to try to work that out now versus have a judge suspend it and then it's not in place till 2028. Because there's an old chair of election law, Representative Griffin, representative from Goffstown, and she once told me, Ross, there's 3 bodies in election law. There's the House, the Senate, and the courts. So said always remember the courts. Further questions, comments, concerns? Representative Gilmore.
So this going to be when or since I don't do it, but my helpers do, open these 1,800, 500 absentee ballots. There's going to be a picture in there?
That's with the application.
Okay, that's just the application, not going to be with.
Oh yeah, no. Well, you cannot include it's a secret ballot, so that would violate secret ballot.
Right, it'll just be the ballot.
Yeah, that's why my comments said about we need to do the control on the when the ballot goes out. When the control needs to be when the ballot goes out.
Okay.
Representative Quayle.
So you're saying the process for an absentee ballot would actually be more similar to that for a ballot voting in person, because when you're voting in person currently, you have to present the ID before you receive the ballot.
Correct. That was the idea.
So the time to present the ID for an absentee ballot would be with the application before you receive the ballot.
Correct. And you can include it with the application. You can include a photocopy. There wasn't any shenanigans like there's been in the past where it's like it must be a color copied and double embossed or anything like that. Just if they've gone through the trouble of including a copy with their application, I think that suffices. The other thing is people always go, well, what if they don't have a printer? If they don't have a printer, they can't print the application. So if they've got if they can print the application, they can print the copy. Representative Grill.
So if someone was submitting their application via email or, I guess email is the only way, would they just send in the photocopy
Yeah.
as an attachment?
Including a copy. I would consider that a copy. Yeah. I tried to make it as reasonable as possible. Because the goal is not to stop them from voting. The goal is to make sure they are who they say they are, to fulfill the ID requirement.
Got it.
And one question.
Representative, yes, Ward.
Just a quick question on line 9.
Mm-hmm.
Could you define personally presenting?
Yep. If they are there handing their ID over.
So you can't mail it in?
You can include a copy of the voter identification with the absentee ballot application.
These are all or.
Okay. Good enough.
Okay. It's tried to be reasonable. So any other further questions, comments, concerns on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the amendment 2025-2414H to Senate Bill 287.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Guyson.
Yes.
Representative Toner, my
Yes.
apologies. Representative Lane.
Yeah. Yes.
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Gilmore.
Yes.
Representative Bay.
Yes.
Representative Grill.
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Newsom.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. I guess I should have called for a voice vote. I will now move ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 287 with Amendment 2025-2414H. And Representative Toner seconds me on that. We're now in discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll when she is ready.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia. Yes. Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Guyson.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Gilmore,
No.
Representative Bay,
No.
Representative Grill,
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Newsom,
No.
Representative Howard,
No.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion to vote to pass the amendment carries on a vote of 10 to 8. I will be responsible for the majority report. Representative Lane, who will be responsible for the minority report? Representative Lane. Oh, classic Barry Lane lineup on the calendar. I assume I was going to make a consent calendar joke, but I've already done it. Okay, going to close the executive session for 287. So here's where we're going to go. The last bill of the day, the one we haven't exec, is Senate Bill 43, which I imagine we're going to pass together. So I don't know when we're going to get that amendment. So what I'm going to say is there anyone that wishes to redo any other of the votes we've taken today? Is everybody good with the votes we've taken today? Everybody's good with it, right?
I have a question.
Yes, Representative Quayle.
You keep saying 10 to 8. I'm only counting 7 Democrats. Am I missing somebody?
No, Representative Bay is returned.
3, 6,
8.
8. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. So with that, so everybody's good with what we've done today. There's no reconsiderations. We're all good. All right. So I need 10 people to hang so that when we get this amendment back, we can still exec it. But you have my word. We're not going to take up any other business. This is it. But we're going to hang, and we're going to hang here. At least I need 10 of you to hang with me so we can get this amendment and pass it. But I don't see the need to hold everyone here. So yes. Oh, actually, it just came through. So can you check your?
It's too bad because every time you say hang, it sounds more and more fun. You know.
Hang on, we're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time. Memorial Day weekend was yesterday. We kept it going. Okay, so we'll stand in recess subject to the call of the chair while we get copies of the amendment. Chambers, if you're here at 2 o'clock. Okay. We're gonna come back. All right, we're going to reopen the executive session. Going to reopen the executive session for Senate Bill 83, and we will recognize Representative Newsom for a motion.
I move to OTP Senate Bill 43.
Okay, and I will second it. Representative Newsom, do you have an amendment you wish to move?
I do. I'd like to move Amendment 2025-2475H.
Representative Newsom moves Amendment 2025-2475H. I will second it. More on discussion of the amendment. Representative Newsom, if you'd like to go over the changes.
So this is what we discussed on the First Amendment this morning with the hearing. The first section makes minor changes to SB 43, maintaining that it's in line with the Supreme Court case that we discussed during its hearing. And then paragraph 2 simplifies the language for the use of poll books for town and school district business deliberative sessions and special meetings.
Wow, I keep turning the off button on for everybody. Is there further discussion on the amendment? I just want to check something really quick. It's not related to any of your changes, Representative. Just want to look at one other thing. 652, accessible poll books. Okay. All right. Any other discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of adopting Amendment 2025-2475H, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Representative Newsom is recognized for a motion.
I'd like to move we pass SB 43 OTPA.
Representative Newsom moves ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 43 with Amendment 2025-2475H. I will second it. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 43 with Amendment 2025-2475H.
Vice Chairman Quayle.
Yes.
Clerk says yes. Representative Wary.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia.
Yes.
Representative C.
Yes.
Representative Gozowski.
Yes.
Representative Toner.
Yes.
Representative Giason.
Yes.
Representative Lane.
Yes.
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Gilmore.
Yes.
Representative Bay.
Yes.
Representative Grill.
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Newsom.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Chairman Barry.
Chair votes yes. The motion of ought to pass as amendment carries on a vote of 18-0. Representative Newsom, you'll be responsible for the committee report. Is there any objection to this bill being placed on the consent calendar? Hearing none, the bill will be placed on consent calendar. Going to close executive session for Senate Bill 43. It's our last day till the fall, so it's good seeing you all. I'll see you all on Thursday. And today went relatively well, so see you
Thursday next week.
next
this
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah, that's what I said, didn't I? Representative C?
Are we likely to need to discuss any bills that need a committee of conference?
Yeah, if you want to discuss committee of conferences. So right now I've got two left in me, two left committee of conference. So I'm putting in for, it's up to the body, obviously, but I'm putting in for a request for committee of conference on House Bill 154, which is enabling voters to request to have their ballots hand counted. I'm putting it in for myself, Representative Quayle, Representative Burnham, Representative Lane. And then House Bill 270, requiring the preservation of electronic devices. I haven't finished reviewing it yet, so I don't know what I will request there. But once again, it's up to the body. It's not my dictatorship. I will say on House Bill 74, the accessible voting machines, 67, excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying 74, 67, we are going to request a committee of conference on that. And I believe we have found a agreement that most people will be satisfied with, that will put the accessible voting machines where they need to be for the people that need them when they need them, but not require the towns to purchase the programming if no one's actually using it. So I just had that meeting this morning, but we'll probably flush that out in committee of conference. But the goal there is to try to make everybody happy. But at the end of the day, if a voter needs that device, the voter's going to have that device. So we're just looking for a little bit of a relief valve for when it's just completely unused. Yeah, you want
151.
151? I don't think I've gotten that back yet.
They did an OTP.
They did, if it's OTP, it doesn't come back to us. Oh, supervisor checklist. Yeah. What did they do with that one?
They did it back to.
Okay, so we'll probably COC. But anyways, that's the two I have in my possession. I already filed off for 67. And I don't, like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with 270, but I am going to file off for 154. So I will. The policy from the speaker's office on this is they want you have to have voted for the bill on the floor to be on the committee of conference. So what I am interpreting that to be is if it was a voice vote or division vote, even if I have a suspicion how someone voted, I will include the member of the minority party on there. It will be Representative Lane unless I am told otherwise.
HB 464 too.
HB 464.
That's the one that they put all those amendments in.
Oh, they omnibused it?
Oh, yeah.
I can assure you if they omnibused it, I will be requesting a committee of conference. That's you don't even have to worry about that one.
And finally, 626.
626.
That was the one about the vulnerability disclosure program.
Oh, yeah, 626. So 626, I originally filed off for a committee of conference, but after speaking with the sponsor, the vice chair, and the ranking member, I'm going to withdraw that. So we're just going to put a straight concur on that. They chopped off the language that we added that I thought made the bill a little bit better, but the sponsor is fine with it. So, and no one else seemed to have an objection. I don't see the need to hang out with the senators for no reason. So, any other questions for me before we adjourn for our last time before the fall? All right, I will see you guys in the fall.